Hello, this is Noodle Soup, and welcome to the fourth video of this tutorial series. Now that you have your assets ready, and your room ready, we can actually start making the game. Remember how in the beginning of the series, I stated that game development is all about giving instructions to the computer? This is what we're going to do now. In this case, the computer is going to be an object. To create an object, right click on Objects folder, Create, and Object. And we'll name this object OBJ Player. In fact, let's change it to Tank since that's more realistic. Now the next step is to add event, create, add event, and step event. Now what exactly did we do? When I said that you need to give instructions to computers, I meant that literally. You have to define time. The computer needs to know when something starts, when something ends, and what to do in between while the program is running, etc. Thankfully, GameMaker has done all this already, and we only need to worry about these events. You can think of events as the actions that happen as time goes on. The create event and the step event are pretty much all you need for the most part, and here's the difference between them. In simple terms, when you first start the game and you boot it up, the create event is ran, and this event only runs once, and only once. So if you wrote code to move the player to the right in this section, it will only execute once, while the step event is the opposite. It runs after the create event, and it will keep executing until either this object is destroyed or the game ends. We can actually try putting this into practice. Let's try moving the tank to the right. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a sprite to the tank, and we're going to go to our room and drop our tank. Let's get rid of the sprite and drop our tank inside the center of this room. Now what we're going to do is we're going to move the tank to the right. In game development, to move stuff around, we use their x and y coordinates, and we tell them to either add their x coordinate or the y coordinate or whatever. So if you want to move the tank to the right, we have to add its x coordinate to or by 3. And what you notice immediately is that this is incorrect. I can't even run this. And the reason why that is because the way variables work. Now what is a variable? You can think of it as a jar that holds a certain value. And anytime you want to access something within this jar, you call it. X in this case is a variable. But why can't I just write x and add it by 3? Well, the reason why is because you haven't closed the jar. You need to write something like this: x equals x plus 3. What does this mean? It means you got the jar of x, and you're going to set its contents equal to the content inside plus 3. So for example, in English, if our x was equal to 5, the equation would look like this. That might be a little bit complicated, but you get used to it eventually. Point is, now, if we run the game, the player should be moved to the right, which we can't really see because it's only moving by 3 pixels, which is really small. So we can actually change it to, let's say, 50. And now he's actually moved to the right, comparing to the room here, which he was actually originally in the middle. Now what if we change this and move it to the step event? So let's actually add it by 1. How would this look? He's moving to the right now. So what is happening is that we're getting the jar of this tank's x, and we're taking out the contents, and then we're adding that content by 1, and then once we get that number, we're going to put it back in the jar, and that process just keeps repeating over and over again. Now with all of this in mind, we can finally do player movement. So, like I said previously, we need to be able to pretty much write our code in English, and the way we do that is pseudocode. This is not really important to GameMaker, but it's really important for programming as a whole. Being able to speak your code in English makes coding a lot easier and actually able to understand. So, for example, player movement code. So let's write this in English. If I press right, then we want to add player x by 3. And after this, you could actually fully understand what you want this tank to do. So now we could actually write it down in code. In GameMaker, we have things called conditionals, which is basically if something happens, then we will do this. So in GameMaker, you could write like this: if a conditional, which is either true or false, then we'll do code here. So what is our conditional? What is something that we have to check? The player input, right? So we need to check if the player presses right. And we can write that here using this built-in GameMaker function. In summary, it's saying if the keyboard check, which is like if you're pressing a key, the key we chose to check is the right arrow key, then we're gonna do this code, and we're just gonna do what we did last time. X plus, x equals x plus 3. And now when we run this, if we press right, we can finally move our tank. Well, since this is gonna be a last stand kind of game, we kind of need the tank to be like right about, let's say about here. And we need him to move up and down only. So, I want you to try to use this logic to be able to move up and down. And as a hint, you have to use their Y coordinate to be able to move around. Okay, you should be done. So, a problem that you might have experienced was that when you wrote an upwards, let's say VK up, equal to Y minus 5, and you press play, a problem that you might have experienced was that when you went upwards, you went downwards, and when you went downwards, you went upwards. Oh wait, hold up, I gotta change that real quick. And you might be confused. Well, the reason why that is because the way GameMaker handles, or pretty much any game engine, handles their coordinates. The coordinates actually start from the top left. So when you want to go down, you have to add the Y coordinate. When you want to go up, you have to subtract the Y coordinate, which is really weird. Just get used to it. And once we make that change, then we can finally move up and down in peace. I want to change the speed because I think 5 is a bit too large. So I'll change it to 2. Better. Now there's actually a much simpler way to do this. Because you do notice how when you want to change the speed of up and down, you have to manually change this number, change this number. Now imagine you have 4 directional movement, and you have to change the number for each individual number. That seems really inefficient. Well, we can actually make this more efficient by creating a speed variable. So in our create event, we can create a speed variable, we'll call it speed is equal to, let's say 2. And then put this variable, which is equal to 2, and assign it to this area. And it pretty much does the same thing. Up and down. And what's cool now is that if I change this speed, I only need to change one thing, and it will affect both up and down. So you could utilize variables to make your stuff more efficient, basically. Alright, now that we have the movement down, we need to create the shooting. And let's actually write this down in pseudocode first. If, what button can we shoot? Let's do space. If space is pressed, then what should we do? We should create the bullet. Create bullet there. Create bullet. And yeah, that's about it. Yeah, you just create the bullet. So super simple. So if keyboard check pressed, and then we'll do VK space because that's the space button. Then what we're gonna do is we're gonna create a button. And to create something in GameMaker, you would use the instance create function. Instance create, and you choose your layer. A little editor's note: these functions allow you to put numbers within them, and depending on what numbers you put inside of them, it will affect the output of what this function does. Where should we create it? We should probably create it. Let's just do it at the tank's X and Y. X, Y, and the layer name. The layer we're going to use it is the instance layer. We can't just write instance because that won't work. We have to put it in quotes. Instances. And then let's do an object bullet, which we haven't created yet. So we got to create an object. We'll call this obj bullet. And then we'll assign this sprite to this object. So let's create the bullet now. Bullet. And then we run the game. We see that we now can create bullets, but these bullets don't really do anything. So we gotta make it do something. So let's go to the bullets thing, and let's create a create event and a step event like we did last time. And now what we're gonna do is we're just gonna make it move right, which is super simple. We'll just say x equals x plus 5, or yeah, any number, any speed you want. Okay, so let's see now. There we go. We're getting one step closer to finishing the game. Now before we get to the next step, I think I want to give a background so that it looks kind of pretty, I guess. So I'm going to say SPR background, and you don't have to do this, although I recommend you should because a black background is kind of boring. I'm going to set this to the room size and just draw on it, I guess. And now we have a very bare basic background. So now what we'll do is we'll go to our assets layer and we'll just drag this background right behind here. And when we run the game, it looks a lot more prettier. Now you will also notice that the sprites are really blurry, and that's because we have to change some features real quick. So go to game options up here, go to Windows, go to graphics, and we're just gonna turn off interpolate colors between pixels. And now when we play the game, it's pixel perfect. Now the next step to do is to add the enemies. So let's make an enemy object, obj enemy. Let's capitalize E. Let's drag the enemy here. And let's put an enemy inside the room. Let's say about outside. And now we're gonna do something really simple. Basically like what the bullet did. Oh shoot, wrong event. We're just gonna get the X and we're gonna subtract it by X minus 5. That's too fast. 3. And now the enemy runs at you. Now, as you can probably tell, okay, well, first of all, he's actually really hard to see him, so let me just make his outline more apparent. Now, as you can probably tell, one enemy isn't enough, so let's add a bunch of enemies. Now, I'm kidding. This is really inefficient. You should never do this in game dev. What you should do, instead, is how do we make it so that enemies spawn randomly? Well, we first gotta create the enemies. But who's gonna create the enemies? Could the tank create the enemies? Yes, he probably could create the enemies. But more realistically, you would have a thing called a manager. And a manager is basically exactly what it is. It manages everything that could happen in a game. In this case, we are gonna create our events here, and we're gonna drag our manager just maybe around here. And now we're gonna tell the manager to create enemies around the area randomly. So we gotta first create the instance. So we're gonna say instance create. Actually, not the create event. We're gonna say instance create. Let's go layer. Let's do random numbers. And random numbers in GameMaker are easy. It's just random number, random underscore number. Oh shit, wait, random range. My bad. And this gives you a random range between two numbers. You can go random range, and this gives you a full number instead of a decimal number. And personally, I like random range more better than random range because I like the full numbers. And so we'll just, well, before we do, let's just actually analyze where we want the enemies to spawn. For the X, they could be around the same area, but what only changes is the Y. So we can make X like a normal number, like it says, like the coordinates say here 550. So we'll just say 550. And for the height, where are they going to spawn? On the y-axis, we can go random range from, let's go from, I don't know, give us some padding, obviously, 20 to 260. And then we're going to do the instances layer, as it's like the only layer we have. And we'll create a enemy object. So now when we press the game, we notice that they come storming at us. This is really bad. Now the reason why that is because we need a timer or cooldown between each spawning. And also that's a bit too high. We might have to lower the Y range. So we'll see 40 and we'll add like 280 here. Let's see how that looks. Yeah, that's a lot better actually. But yeah, now we need to create timers in between each spawning. Let's just figure out how we want to create the timer in pseudocode. That's good practice. We're gonna get a timer, and we're gonna set it equal to timer minus 1, so it decreases by 1 every frame. And then what we want to do is we're gonna check if the timer is equal to 0 or less than or equal to 0. Then we are going to spawn enemy. And not only are we going to spawn an enemy, we're going to set the timer back to a desired value. Like, let's say it's 60. So now, the timer is going to keep decreasing. Once it hits 0 or below, it's going to spawn an enemy and then reset the timer back to 60. So, let's create a timer variable. Let's say 0 here. And we will go like this. If the timer, like I said, is less than or equal to 0, then we are going to, let's just copy this code here to here. And we're going to say timer is equal to 60. And now let's see how this works. And now we notice that every second an enemy spawns. Never mind, because I forgot to decrease the timer. Timer equals timer minus 1. There we go. Now they spawn every second. And I would actually probably decrease the speed of which these guys move. They're too fast. 2. Yeah, that's more reasonable. Now what we're going to do is we are going to make it so that when they hit the bullet, they die, or disappear basically. So, in the enemy step event, we could write in pseudocode if touching bullet, then, let's just say destroy self or something. Destroy self. Right? And in practice, it would look like this. If, to check if you're touching something, you'd say place meeting x and y of a specific instance, let's say actually obj bullet, then we will destroy ourselves. And to destroy an instance, you could just say instance destroy. And when we run it, we could actually destroy these zombies now. Now if you do notice that the bullet doesn't disappear, and that's a bad thing, because piercing is too OP. So what we could do is we could say something like this. Not only are we going to destroy the zombie, we're also going to destroy the bullet. Let's destroy the bullet. So when we do this, it seems to work. But now there's an issue. What if I shoot 2 bullets at once? Oh, it destroys all of them now. That's a bad thing. How do we solve this issue? We want to destroy that specific bullet that is touching, but how? And the way you would do that is with the instance place function. So we're going to create a variable called, we'll just say inst, and we're going to set it equal to instance place. Now this specific function, what it does is that when it touches an object, it will basically set this value equal to this object specific, the instance that is touching his specific ID. And now what we could do is we could say instance destroy that specific instance. And now when you play the game, you can shoot multiple enemies at once without worrying about your bullets disappearing. Now that we reached pretty much the end of all the objects in their code, let's just tweak some things a little bit. First of all, the bullet seems to be spawned in the wrong area of the tank, like down there. It should be spawning right at the tip of that tank. So let's create an offset for the spawning of the tank. So rather than spawning directly on the X and Y, we're going to spawn the X on 2 different areas. We'll say an X offset. We'll create a variable called X offset. We'll set that equal to 0 because we don't know what the offset is yet. We're going to create a variable called the Y offset, which is going to equal to 0 as well. We're going to add the X by the X offset and the Y by the Y offset. So now what's going to happen is, let's go to our tank. The tank's X and Y coordinate is always going to be right here. So the offset is going to be how far it is to the right and how far top is the tip of the barrel. So first of all, let's locate where this point is. I have a pretty primitive way. I'm just going to keep drawing till I hit the mark. Oh, I was really close. And now I found it, it's right here. So now that I found the center point of the tank, it's 34 by 18, which means that this area is 34 and this area is 18. So the offset is going to be, we're going to offset it by 34 and we're going to offset the y set by 18, but negative 18, because remember. So now that we have this down, if we try it out, it spawns right on the tip of the barrel. Now let's do some extra tweaking as well. How about we make a feature where you could hold down the shooting button and it will shoot constantly. Right now it's not doing that because I haven't built that feature in, but what I want you to do is using the knowledge of the timer, as you saw for the manager, and the knowledge of keyboard inputs, I want you to try to be able to create a shooting cooldown that as you're holding space, you can shoot things and it can repeat forever. Okay, so when you finish, it should look something like this, where you have a shoot cooldown that decreases by 1, and we have a conditional that checks to see if that cooldown has reached 0 or below. And if it has, if you're pressing space, then create the bullet and reset the timer. Now the next thing we want to do is to fix this issue. There's no collision. Well, there's actually a pretty simple way to do it. If we think about it, right? We just need to lock this guy's X between two specific values and not allow him to go past that. Right? So in pseudocode, if Y is greater than the max, then we'll set, if Y is greater than the max, then we're gonna set the Y to the max, which means it won't ever increase. And if the Y is less than the minimum, then we will set the Y to the minimum. And we don't even need to write this in pseudocode. This is pretty much the code. Now, the difference is that we need to be able to find these values. So let's find the max and min. Looks like the max is going to be down here because it's positive. It's going to be, let's just say 260 for an even number. And for the minimum, we'll set it to, let's say 20. And we run this. He's now locked between two values. Now that you have an understanding of basic coding in GML, the next thing we're going to do is add sound to this game so that sounds really nice. And don't be afraid, for the most part, this is how your code is going to look. It's really simple. This is pretty much in all my big games. It's just a bunch of if statements with a bunch of conditionals and a bunch of these variables all over again. And in no time you'll get used to this. But anyways, that's about it. And thank you for watching this video.